Annuities aren't the easiest products to understand, but to help them become more understandable, Dana Anspach from Sensible Money is here to walk us through annuities and monthly statements and whether you should own one or whether you should exchange it or what you should do with your annuity. Dana, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Thanks.
A pleasure. So we're eager to have you hand walk us through this topic and help decipher what oftentimes is undecipherable to average annuity owners.
You know, that is such an accurate statement. You wouldn't believe the amount of time we spend deciphering annuity contracts when a client comes in with something that they bought previously. So it's a lot of work to figure out what to do with it and even how to understand it. And although we understand it, we then have to translate that to make sure that the client understands what they own and what it can be used for and, you know, what the pros and the cons are. So I look forward to sharing all of this.
Right. And so obviously, maybe start here just for a tiny second. There's so many different types of annuities, right? Fixed annuities, index-linked annuities, variable annuities, and now we have registered index-linked annuities. There's a whole, seems like there's a whole menu of a Chinese buffet of annuities out there. So where to begin?
Where to begin? Well, I think what we'll look at today are some of the most complex contracts that are out there, which are index annuities that have some type of an income rider attached to them, and variable annuities that have some kind of an income rider attached to them. Those products tend to be a little more difficult to understand versus there are fixed annuities that work much more like a CD where you put a lump sum of money in, it pays a fixed interest rate, and it has a maturity date like a CD. Nice, simple, easy to understand. There are also income annuities where you put a lump sum in and you either get a current stream of lifetime income, or you could have a deferred annuity. It's going to pay you a lifetime income later without any bells and whistles. And those are pretty easy to understand. But the kind we're talking about today, index annuities and variable annuities, you put a lump sum in and then there's these different investment choices. And then there's these additional riders that offer some type of a guaranteed income benefit, but that income benefit isn't exactly the same thing as annuitizing. And there's bonuses that can be paid and things called roll-up periods. And there can be two different values showing on your statement. So they're complex, and that's what we'll focus on today.
All right. So the index-linked annuity is our first one to look at?
It is, and I'm going to share my screen and look at a sample statement. And so we just picked a sample statement. This is no reflection on the company that issued this annuity. It's probably changed names numerous times actually since it was issued. But this is an annuity. We can look back and see that one, it's owned within an IRA. So it's important to know that you can own an annuity just like you can own a stock or a mutual fund or a bond inside of an IRA. And that means whatever tax rules apply to the IRA also apply to the annuity. So there's no special tax treatment for this annuity since it's in the IRA. The IRA tax rules will trump any other tax rules. It was initially bought for $75,000, and you also see this bonus pay to issue. So you'll see annuities that offer a 5% bonus, in this case is what it was. And so when we look at the full amount that got invested in this contract, it was actually about $78,000. Now we can scroll down and we can see that for the most recent contract year, January 4th, 2021, and I'm looking at a statement that was issued January 4th of 2022, about a year old, that the beginning value was 109 and the ending cash surrender value was 110. That's all pretty simple and straightforward, not too complicated. But if we scroll down to this second page, we see some additional numbers. Now we have this accumulation value on the left. And over here on the right, we have this withdrawal benefit rider and this value called a withdrawal benefit phase. And I talk about this in my book, Control Your Retirement Destiny, and I describe it as what I call wallet A, real money, and wallet B, I hate to use the term fake money, but it's an accounting entry, right? And so if you were to cash in this contract, you would get this $110,000. That is the real money value. Now, there's no more surrender charge on this contract. So if you are looking at your own annuity statement, you would have to pay attention to if there's a surrender charge, and you would see what you could get if you cashed it in by looking at this cash surrender value. Now, that is what I refer to as wallet A. Then wallet B is this accounting entry where they said, okay, when you put this original money in, we are going to guarantee during what was called the accumulation phase that it will grow. In this annuities case, I believe it was at a 7% annual rate for 10 years. And we will use that accounting entry, I don't know what else to call it. It's, that number to calculate the guaranteed amount of income that you can draw out of this contract. And so here you'll see this withdrawal benefit amount and this maximum annual withdrawal percentage of 4.5%. And this is telling the annuity owner that right now, if you start taking annual income, you can draw out $6,974.69. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but this is what I refer to as wallet B. This $154,000 isn't money you could cash in and take with you. It is only used in the formula to determine the amount of annual income that you can take. So we often see people mix these things up. They think that this bonus they're getting and this 7% guaranteed return during the accumulation phase is real money that they could then cash in and take with them. And it's not. It's just used to determine this guaranteed lifetime income. Now, there's a couple of other things on this page. One, you see this minimum guaranteed contract value, another confusing number over here. And generally that is telling you that if you were to pass along, there is usually a minimum death benefit on the policy. And so even if the market value of the investments were to go down, there's some kind of a minimum value that is paid out to an end beneficiary. That is typically what that means. Now, over here on the right, we see this maximum annual withdrawal percentage. Now, in this particular person's case, we had to go back to the actual annuity contract and look this up. And usually it's a percentage that's based on the age, and it can be either the age of the annuity owner, or it will, if there's a joint owner, in this case, we see this joint income protection, then it would be the age of the youngest spouse. Now, we happen to know that the youngest spouse was over the age of 65, and according to the actual annuity contract, it should be paying out 5% once they're over 65. And so the statement only said 4.5. It's like, what's going on? So we called jointly with the account owner to the annuity company, and they fixed it very quickly, but they said it was a glitch in their system. So some kind of glitch in their system was putting this wrong formula on the client's statement. Now, if you were the statement owner and didn't know and didn't go look up your contract and didn't know how to read through 100 pages of an annuity prospectus to figure that out, you might just say, all right, well, I'm going to turn this on and this is the income I get. In this case, we were turning this guaranteed lifetime income on. We knew to call, and so we were able to get that extra 0.5% of lifetime income. Now, with that lifetime income, that wallet B amount, here's how the guarantee works. They are paying this income for life, actually a little bit more than this, but they're paying this for life with the option that each time this withdrawal is paid out, it is reducing the wallet A real money account value. And if the wallet A account value goes to 0, the annuity company will continue to pay this amount of money out for life. So I'll refer to it as a cookie jar, right? You got $110,000 in your cookie jar. Those cookies belong to you. They're going to dole them out to you at $6,974 a year. And if your cookie jar goes empty, then the annuity company says, oh, well, we'll now use our funds out of our own cookie jar to continue to pay you this out for the remainder of your life. Clear as mud, right?
I'm filled with questions. You mentioned that the maximum annual withdrawal rate on the statement is 4.5%, but it was in fact 5%, and that it was due to a glitch in the system. Do you think that same glitch would, at the time that you start your withdrawals, have fixed that, or is this sort of a printing error, or the company would not have ever caught it?
I don't know. You'd like to think that when they started the income that it would have gotten caught, but I would say more than likely that it wouldn't have, right? The owner of the annuity would have called up and said, yes, I'd like to take my lifetime income. And, they would have just gotten this 4.5%, because if that's what's in the system, that's what's being pulled into the statement.
So for the benefit of the folks who own annuity contracts of this sort, the thought is, yes, your statement may be wrong, and it would behoove you to go look at the original contract, read it from cover to cover, take it to a financial advisor who is skilled enough to sort of decipher these and decode this statement.
Yeah, I mean, in fair credit, I have never seen an error like this on an annuity statement before. And so, many of the insurance companies have bought books of business from each other, and we've seen the names on the statements change. And so as the information moves from one system to another, I can easily see how a system might not be set up so that this percentage adjusts as the account owner or annuitant's age adjusts. So, it's fair to say that there could be other contracts that have this kind of error. I haven't seen it before, but definitely it was worth a phone call in our case to check. Yeah. And we'll take a look at the actual annuity contract in a minute.
Yeah. So before you go, just one quick question. Assuming that someone turns on their withdrawal benefit and then decides 4 or 5 years later that they don't want this benefit any longer, they could, and assuming that there is no surrender charge, as in this case, take the cash surrender value, whatever it might be at that point in time?
Correct. So as they're taking this guaranteed withdrawal, this money is reducing their wallet A value, and wallet A is still invested. We'll look at the investment choices in this contract in a minute. And so if a few years later, they said, I'm going to stop this guaranteed income, and let's say at that point there was $85,000 left in wallet A, they could cash it in and take out the $85,000, because they didn't annuitize the contract. When we use the term annuitize, it basically means you're, locked into that guaranteed income stream. These withdrawal benefit riders are rather unique in that they will guarantee you an income based on a formula like this, but without having to annuitize the contract, so that you do still have access to any remainder amount should you change your mind.
I think that's it for now. I'm sure I'll have more questions in a second.
I'm sure you will. Well, I want to move on. This particular contract we're looking at is an index annuity, and these have been in the news lately. So when we move on to the next page, we see these different investment choices. This is where I wanted to go. We're looking here, and we see that the full contract value is in this point-to-point cap. Well, with these index annuities, what they're typically doing is assigning an index, usually it's the S&P 500, and allowing you a portion of the return. And generally, there is a minimum guaranteed return, and it's a way of hedging risk. So let's say you said, wow, the S&P 500 has gone down, over 20% in a quarter before with bear markets. I don't want that kind of risk. And so I want to know that maybe my minimum return is 0. I won't gain anything, but I won't lose anything. But I can participate in some of the upside of this S&P 500. Well, in this case, they have a 1.75% cap. Meaning no matter how well the S&P 500 does in this calendar year, you're only going to get the first 1.75% of any upside. That's not much upside. If you chose the fixed interest account, you would get 1.5%. So you're only getting an extra 0.25% with this S&P. Now, what's interesting is if you go back to this contract, it was originally issued by ING, and we can see here that there was, 75,000 put in plus the 5% bonus took it to 78,000 in this point-to-point cap strategy. And the original index spread was 7.5%. Now, I will take a cap of 7.5% on the S&P 500 with downside protection. You can see why this would have been attractive, but they are allowed to change those terms. Now, they do give you notice. So when your year comes up and you're renewing your strategy, they will give you advance notice of what the new cap is going to be. And you would need to be monitoring this, and you could change strategies if you wanted. Well, let's say we wanted to change to this point-to-point participation rate strategy. Well, this participation rate means whatever the S&P does, you're only going to get 15% of that. So again, if the S&P was up 10%, you're going to get a 1.5% return that year. You know, it's not so great. There's this monthly cap, which means it's a formula that determines, you know, every month what the S&P does. And they're basically saying over the year, the monthly cap is 0.85. This one looks most attractive to me right now, but still you could have a calendar year where most of the months were low returns and most of the returns happened in a single month. And this wouldn't be so great either. And then there's this monthly average that's determined by a spread. And what the spread means is that you take whatever the S&P 500 did less the 8.5% spread. So again, you know, if you had a 10% return, you're left with a 1.75% is what you get after the spread. So none of these options look great. You know, the monthly cap might be the most attractive of these out of these choices, but that could change every year because every year they're going to change these terms. So you would really need to be looking at each year when they send that notice, which of these strategies should you change to? Again, clear as mud, right?
You're making it more clear by the moment, though, I have to admit.
Well, that's good. Well, this is why these have been in the news lately, is because, you know, people bought these contracts with, you know, a strategy like this that had, as we saw when we look at this contract. Now, this is a 66-page contract that we're looking at. So when we talk about having to look in here to look at the withdrawal benefit riders and look up all of this, you know, it's a lot of information to go through. You have to know right where you're looking. But when they bought it, it was 7.5%. Now, in this contract, there's one more page I want to go to, page 24. So this is where it details the terms of that minimum guaranteed withdrawal benefit rider. And here it's telling us that it's based on the age of the youngest active spouse at time of first withdrawal. And so we could see if they were in the 65 to 69 age range, that withdrawal percentage should be 5%. Now, we knew to go here and to look up these terms. And that's why we knew that when we were looking at this contract, that this 4.5% that was stated on this you know, guaranteed income section was incorrect. And so again, it takes you know, a good amount of digging to go through all of that and figure that out.
So Dana, go back to that page that had the 7% as the point to point.
Yeah.
And I think scroll up for a second. And if you look at this table, it shows that none of the other options were appealing at the time either, it looks like.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure if they simply didn't fill in the terms of these options because it wasn't chosen. So I noticed that also. And I thought, well, this is really odd that all of these other options, I mean, why would you choose a strategy that had a 0% participation rate? So I thought, well, maybe when they issue this contract, they simply didn't fill in these terms because no money was put in those strategies. I'm not sure, but it's a really great observation.
Yeah. So, and then in this contract, there would be language that suggests that we can change the point-to-point cap index strategy, or the strategy, right? It says there clearly initial index cap, but
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the language in this contract does allow them to change this, and they do give you notice. So before your contract renews, or, you know, you had each year, they will send you a letter and it will tell you the new terms. Matter of fact, I believe if we look at the top here, Strategy changes are allowed through February 4th, 2022, which is 30 calendar days from this statement. So if you're not scouring your statement for this, this statement it was issued January 4th. You'd have to be looking at it within that first few weeks. You'd be coming in here, looking at this and saying, wait, 1.75% cap? No, I think I'm going to change strategies. And you would have to be evaluating these other strategies and make that change before February 4th for your upcoming calendar year. Interesting stuff, isn't it?
It is. So before we move on, I had a question about the bonus. Oftentimes, clients, would-be annuity owners, are attracted to the bonus. How much weight do you place on people thinking about the bonus as a selling point?
Yeah. So, as we saw in this contract, right, there's this 5% bonus that was added on to the initial value. Well, the real question is, what if you had done something different with this money? And so if we go and we look at, this is right off of Yahoo Charts, and it is taking the S&P 500 on January 4th, 2009. I actually used Vanguard's 500 index fund, so there was at least some management fees in there for the mutual fund. And I took VBIRX, one of Vanguard's bond funds. And so January 4th, 2009 to January 4th, 2022, and we can see the S&P 500 is this blue line, 480% cumulative return, and then the Vanguard bond fund only a 3% cumulative return. These are not annualized returns. And so if you had taken your original contribution, that 75,000, sometimes you'll hear anti-annuity people say, oh, if you put all that in the S&P 500, but the reality is you wouldn't have. This was January 2009. People were scared to invest. Investing at that time in hindsight would have been, great, but it was it was terrifying at the time. And so you were looking for something that wasn't extremely high risk. And so I think it's more fair to compare that to if you had invested 60% in the S&P 500, 40% in the bond fund, it would have grown to 247,000. And so using the 4% rule, you could have taken $9,881 a year off of it starting, around 2022. Now, in reality, with the income rider, you're going to get $7,749. That's based on that 5% income rider calculation. And your actual wallet A value is 110,000. So in hindsight, would you have been better off investing 60%, 40%, in a pretty standard portfolio structure? Well, yes, you would have. So how much weight do I play on that 5% bonus? Well, not a whole lot. What happens in these contracts is the fees are typically running around 3 to 4% a year. And so not in this index annuity, that's actually not the case. The way they're getting their fees is by capping your return, right? That's essentially what's happening. We're going to look at a different contract in a minute that the fees might come into play a little bit more. But you are buying insurance. And so from the standpoint that this provided a hedge against downside risk, and it provided a guaranteed income, it did its job. We can always look back and say, well, if I would have known, if I would have just invested in a 60-40 index funds, right, I would have been better off. But in reality, it did its job. And what we come across all the time are people that already have these contracts. And so then the question becomes, well, now what do I do? Well, at this point, we couldn't take this $110,000 and invest it and come anywhere close to getting this $7,749 a year of guaranteed income. And so now that they own it and this income rider is in place, it's better to keep it. And we want to actually turn that income rider on sooner rather than later. What we hope is the client lives a long, happy life, and they live so long that they use up all of the cookies out of their own cookie jar, and they have to rely on the cookies from the insurance company's jar. And the sooner we turn this income on, the more likely that is to happen. And so that's what we want to do once they already own it. And we review these types of contracts, a few times a year. We come across someone that owns it. And in many cases, once they're already into it, the right thing to do is to keep it and turn the income rider on. There's, of course, no blanket rule of thumb. There's sometimes where we see contracts that aren't as underwater as this one is. They, may have invested at a different time where the return was higher, where it could be an opportunity to exit out of it. But in this one, keeping it at this stage is definitely the best thing to do.
Right. And oftentimes annuity owners are approached by perhaps another advisor to suggest what's called a 1035 exchange. And in this case, you would, I'm guessing, advise against it.
And with an annuity that's owned within an IRA, there's really no reason to do an exchange, right? If you wanted to exit out of this contract, you could just cash it in and roll it to an IRA with no tax consequences. And so people forget that with IRA annuities, right, you don't have to move into another annuity contract. Now, there are also non-qualified annuities, and we have a second example up here. This is an annuity that I believe is non-qualified, and you can see that up here under plan type. And this is a variable annuity, not an indexed annuity. It was also bought around that Great Recession timeframe in April of 2008. And here we can see that the current value of the annuity is $153,000. And that would be what I would call wallet A, real money. If the client cashes in the contract, that's what they get. And over here, we see this current income base of 199. Well, that's wallet B. It's an accounting entry, and its sole purpose is used to calculate this guaranteed annual income. So they could receive almost $10,000 a year for life if they turn this income stream on right now. Now, in this case, it's a non-qualified annuity, and the client is not yet 59 and a half. So if they were to start taking income, there's a 10% penalty tax, and penalty taxes are in addition to income taxes. So when we talk about penalty taxes, it doesn't just mean, oh, I only have to pay 10%. It means you're going to pay a 10% penalty tax on early withdrawal amounts in addition to any income taxes. And so it doesn't make sense for this person to turn this contract on until they are at least 59 and a half, but likely at that point, it will make sense to turn the income stream on fairly quickly, probably right at 59 and a half or age 60. I was going to say one other thing. Yes. So I mentioned this is a variable annuity, and where you see the difference is when we look at the allocation of the investments inside, we see, they're called separate accounts. They look like mutual funds. Technically, they're called a separate account that's available within these annuity contracts. And it looks much more like what we might see in a brokerage account with an allocation built of funds. And so you have a little more flexibility in how you do the allocation, and you're going to have typically anywhere between about 3 and 4% a year of fees on this type of contract. So again, if I were to go back and compare, what this would have grown to if we invested it in these types of funds outside of an annuity, well, I'm not going to have 4% fees outside of this annuity. And so, but now that it's here, and you were buying insurance protection at that point. Now that this person owns it, one of the most effective uses of it is going to be to turn on this income stream. There's no way you could cash in this $153,000 and get a guaranteed income for life of $10,000 a year. And so that becomes, one of those situations that once you're into these types of products, oftentimes the best use is to keep them.
It's important to note too, around variable annuities, you mentioned that you have all these separate accounts. You are in control, in essence, of the investments. You can decide how much to put into which account and which investments to use. And usually there's a somewhat large enough menu of investments from which to choose.
You are, to a certain degree. Now, many of these contracts that have these guaranteed income riders on them also will have some restrictions on how you invest, and that's to limit their own risk. And so they may not want someone putting all of their money in one fund that is super aggressive. And so some of them will have restrictions. They will have certain allocation models that you need to follow, or they may have a maximum percentage that you could put in any one of the investment choices. I know for a fact this sample that we're looking at here does have restrictions on how you invest. Now, this is a fairly balanced investment portfolio here. You'll see, both bonds and stock funds, US and international, in this allocation. And that was chosen because you have these fees coming out of it. And we don't want the annuity itself to experience too much what we call sequence risk. And so we want a fairly balanced allocation to give this, the best chance of, in an ideal world, the investments would grow to exceed this guaranteed income rider base. And so you want to set the portfolio up so that it at least has the best opportunity for that to happen.
Dana, talk a little bit about, we've now described variable annuities and index linked annuities in terms of people and which option they should choose to accomplish which objective. Do you have a sense of which works for perhaps accumulation versus decumulation or risk profiles?
It was between variable annuities and what was the second part of your question?
Or index linked, in terms of, how do you choose which one that is right for you, given, what you're trying to accomplish? Risk profile.
It all depends on the contract that's out there, right? Historically, I actually, was somewhat of a fan of the index annuities with the guaranteed income riders for clients that were extremely risk adverse. And so it at least gave them the option for some upside. But if they're going to be changing those cap rates to 1.75%, then these variable annuities become a better option. Personally, in the accumulation phase, I'm not a huge fan of either. I think a better use of annuities is as you're nearing retirement, when you're looking at your portfolio and saying, well, how could I guarantee income for life? Now, that being said, we will look at someone's total guaranteed income from Social Security, pensions, and if it's too low relative to their expenditures, we do want to look at additional ways to guarantee income in retirement, and annuities become one of the products that we look at. And if they've already purchased something like this, that's where we're often saying, well, great, we're going to keep it, we're going to turn it on. That's going to add an additional $10,000 of guaranteed income to your plan. But when it's hard. I think we all bring our biases to these discussions. And so what's really challenging for me is when I go back and look at, well, if this had been in a balanced portfolio without all of those fees, right, it would, in most scenarios, have done better. But at the same time, when you have a really risk adverse person, would they have done that? If the insurance and the protections that are provided by these contracts are what allows someone to invest in the first place, then great, right? Then that's better than have not having done anything.
What price protection, I guess, right?
It's like any kind of insurance, right? If we want to insure the outcome of our investments, well, there's going to be a cost. And that's what these contracts do. The two that we're looking at are ensuring an amount of lifetime income that you can take later on.
Well, I think you've done a pretty good job of uncomplicating the complicated. But anything we miss?
Goodness, I don't think so. I mean, I should say there's probably lots of things we missed because there's so many nuances to these. But I think that gives a really good overview of, what you want to look at if you already own one of these, what you might want to consider if you're thinking about purchasing one in the future.